I'm the president of TransitX, and we'll talk more about circular city and podway projects and how that impacts commercial real estate.
Thank you, Mike. First question to Mike. Not everybody's familiar with the circular city concept or development ideas. Please let people know what it is and what your interest is with it.
Sure, thanks. So people have heard about smart cities, and I think if you look at a smart city, what I say is like they're collecting a lot of data and they're doing analysis of the problems of traffic and parking and pollution, but they're not really solving the problem. They're just kind of monitoring it. And so a circular city is saying like, no, let's rethink a city and not just throw technology at it, but being able to say how do you create a good quality of life, a very energetic city, one that's designed for people and not technology. That's kind of what I would say is a circular city is about this circular notion of both being designed for people, but being aligned with the planet, environmental, but also encouraging prosperity and innovation. That's sort of what a circular city is.
Mike, who would benefit from a circular city? What kind of population, what kind of regions and areas would benefit from the circular city concept?
When you look at where people are living now, whether it's like in a city or suburb or village, each one has its own advantages. And what I try to do with circular city is saying like, well, how could you combine the advantages of all of them? So it's really saying, hey, could you create something that would appeal to people that want to live in a village, that want to live in a suburb, and want to live into an exciting city? And so we're trying to make it where we could do 1,000 cities in the next 10 years and be able to just transform. Because think of it now, we have this, the climate change, and we need to have a low carbon or a negative carbon. And right now, there's no models other than Circular City for how to create a carbon negative footprint for a city. And so that's sort of the opportunity, is wholesale rethinking about real estate, about building out urban developments that have all these positive benefits. And I sort of make the quip that the only negative is its carbon footprint.
That leads to the next question, which is, please tell us how you integrate your podway systems into this development.
Sure. Well, it sort of starts with that. Think of an existing city. Half of the land in most cities is dedicated to transportation. Not only the roadways and the highways, but the parking lots, the side parking, the driveways, the body shops, all the gas stations. All these things take up like half of the land area of a city, right? So think of that. Think about New York City. What's the value of half of the land area of New York City? I don't know, a few $1 trillion probably. I mean, I haven't done the calculations, but if you could make a city where you don't need to use the land for transportation, it would be transformative. And that's sort of what the podways enable. Is it enables, well, I don't know, we're probably all the generation will remember the Jetsons, right? So the Jetsons, they had like these round buildings elevated up off the ground, the little pods that would basically go to the outside of the building and have dedicated access. That's essentially what Circular City is in a nutshell, is being able to have convenience to individual units in a low-rise building that actually visually looks like it's floating off the ground.
Mike, we do see some podways running through your background, and for those who don't know what podways are, that would be the podway. But also, that explains quite a bit to people who don't have a clue. Would you mind sharing the visuals of a circular city?
Sure. Do you want me to sort of share?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
You can explain through this system actually the difference between the road system and the podway, but then you move to the circular city. I think that would be really interesting because of the example you gave of New York.
Okay, so so as I mentioned, what a circular city is it's using 100% of your land area for people, not for transportation. And so it is a sustainable model for any development, and it has these aspects of being affordable, healthy, efficient, resilient, flexible, and scalable. So here's an example of Dubai, where you can just see the spaghetti mess of, what people say is like, oh yes, look at there's all the highways, but you need that capacity, because they don't really have the high capacity system. So here's a location near me in Packards Corner in Boston, where you show the cars, the buses, the trains, and the trucks. And what happens if you don't have that? You can have podways going, access to it. So the model is we can transform any land, whether it's inaccessible, nothing that's there, whether it's slums, difficult terrain, and essentially you're turning that into a circular city. It can even be contaminated in a flood zone, even devastated by war. And the model is that, independent of architecture, 100% of the land is open and green space. 100%. Actually, more than 100% when you include the ground level and the upper level. But it makes the city beautiful. It makes it healthy. And the Podway is a narrow gauge railway with these automated, on-demand, ultralight cars. So that's what it kind of gives you. It gives you sort of, no land use, but the convenience that people love and demand from a car, but with the capacity of rail. And so when you're looking at it, it's like, you can have it where there's even walking paths at both the ground level and going from building to building. And you have these lanes that are open in green space, and the pods are going directly to each unit. So you're having it like you have in a suburb. You have your car going to your individual home. In this case, it's on a multi-level building. And whether or not the architecture it can be any architecture, right? You can have it where it looks like it's from, Hawaii or Scandinavia or China. It could be built over wetlands. It could be built over a devastated war area. And then the interior of these buildings, which is very important because it creates a private space as well as an outside public, but that could be used for gardens, water parks, community gardens, any number of things, even bazaars. And that your lanes, instead of being used for transportation purposes, can now be agriculture. It could be energy production. It could be livestock. You could have cows. You could have natural features and rivers, man-made rivers. So think about what creativity and what compelling experiences you can have when you're not using the land for transportation. And that's what and we can talk about more details of, like, these buildings are really kind of shells, and you can have very flexible layouts. The whole purpose is that these buildings are like 100-year buildings because they can be adapted to any use, right? They could be schools or hospitals or work or cafes or small businesses or entertainment. And that you can start with just a single building off of a high-speed podway and then just grow it out with agriculture, industry, and energy into these very high density but very livable districts and large. So it just has a very low operating expenses. And the whole thing, what circularity means is that you reuse everything. You waste nothing. Water, materials, the building itself, the food, the air, the wash, because efficiency means dollars, and dollars means profitability and economic viability. And so what we're trying to do is create it where you avoid all these upfront costs for building all of the highways and railways and bridges and storm systems and stormwater systems and sewers and gas and telecom. So we're putting everything on this one infrastructure, and that's kind of the summary of what we're thinking about for for a circular city.
I had a conversation with someone a few days ago. When they looked at the structure, they say, okay, this looks really high end. How is this possibly going to be inexpensive than the normal, tract homes we have and other buildings or other cities? Would you elaborate on that? And I know you've mentioned that the cost of roads and cost of other infrastructure, but could you elaborate a little bit more on how this becomes really, really inexpensive?
One is that when you have because it's all about the dollars per person, the capital cost and the operational cost per person. So if you have it where even let's say it would be expensive to have a railway go to individual units of an apartment building. Let's say that would be a normal thing that people would say like, well, you can't do that. Well, I was actually just in Boston, and before that, they had a whole bunch of development in the Seaport District. It was one of these major transformation projects in Boston. And they had images from, I don't know, probably about 100 years ago. And they showed how the boxcars were going straight up to the buildings at the ground level, right? So here's in Boston, they had individual access to it. But of course, when you have something that's heavy, like a boxcar, you can't elevate it because then you have to have elevated infrastructure, which is very costly. So one of the things we've done is we've intentionally said, if your structures are dependent upon weight, you have to have a small weight to be able to make it. So we're making it so the infrastructure itself is very lightweight, and it's replacing it because now you don't have to have, the roads and the highways and a water system and the electricity. You're using the same infrastructure for multiple uses. And when you're using the same thing multiple times, well, that's kind of what nature does, right? Nature does the same thing. It has, uses one thing for multiple purposes, and that way you can lower your costs. So it turns out, think of all the things that you need to build centrally to even have the first revenue producing occupant of a city. Okay, let's go through them. You need some access. You need highways, roadways. You're going to need a sewer system, storm drainage system. I mean, help me out. Your electrical distribution system, then your generation. You're going to need to build fire stations, police stations, hospitals, schools. You build billions. So starting a city is a multi-billion-dollar kind of endeavor. It's like, well, you have to build everything out. Well,
right.
But if you're thinking about, it's almost like when you're off the grid. Okay, so when you think off the grid now, you think of this. There's a television show too, Building Off the Grid. They're always showing single-family residences, right? They're always showing, oh yes, we were able to build off the grid. We could, run the heating loops, and we have solar energy, and we have dig our own well, but they never show multi-units. So think of that. What a circular city is, we can build a city incrementally where every building is multi-purpose. It can serve both as a school and a hospital and home for just different levels. You don't have to build huge amounts of centralized infrastructure. Now, there's another model that's being used by 1 billion people that also doesn't have centralized infrastructure, and that's a slum. Now, we're not making slums, right? I'm not trying to say this is the circular slum, but it's the idea is that if you could make infrastructure incremental and you don't have to build it all at once, and the slums actually have a lot of flexibility, right? You basically are creating flexible types of things that are flexible for the use. So if you have a family, if you have an extra person, well, they just move the wall over. But obviously there's a lot of slums, they don't have sanitation and water and electricity and open space and good transportation. So it's kind of interesting when you can have a very low cost when you don't have to build all these the water treatment plants and you don't have to build all this pre-existing infrastructure before you're one revenue producing unit, right? Because you have ghost towns, you have all these, in China, building up these entire cities and nobody's living there. It's like, right. That's risky. How do you reduce that risk? Make it where you can incrementally build it.
came back from Africa. You just met with some senior private-public partnership folks from another African country. I saw you not too long ago in Tajikistan, meeting with the high-level government officials. And I know this is what you do quite often. But I also realized that you've done a whole lot of research on the slums in India, in Nairobi, Kenya, and several other African countries, and so on and so forth. And you said that this circular city concept is the solution to the slums that are afflicting economies, really, so worldwide. Can you elaborate on how that
Yeah.
would help?
Yes, let me put up another, let me kind of give, because I think I have some slides to show there. So, okay, so what we're talking about is how can you take a slum and transform that into a circular city? Now, the global challenge is there's 1 billion people now living in slums. And most conversions haven't worked. They usually involve having to take another piece of land, build these massive towers to handle the density, and then shift people from where they were living to a place that doesn't really fit with what they are used to. Now, why do that transformation? Well, it's humanitarian, it's about cost, about lost productivity, poor healthcare. And I think there's a huge opportunity. If you take those 1 billion people that are now sort of a liability and turn them into an asset and do economic growth, creating higher GDP and getting investment, that's something else. So our approach is this: don't ask for any new land. We can build incrementally on the existing land that has existing slum, and that people are moving voluntarily. You're basically not relocating them. You're just changing and giving them what they now have in a better infrastructure. And that this land can be anywhere. It can be on, a lot of slums are built on hillsides. Roads and a lot of infrastructure does not work very well on hillsides, right? If you look at the sewer systems, the water systems, the transportation systems. So we work with any land, and we can build it rapidly in weeks, not months, because all factory built, which also reduces the cost. And also we're connecting it with the rest of the city. So now you can have people living in this new circular city that has access to jobs, access to stores and clinics and schools. And the other is that having ultra low OPEX. So the operating expenses, if you're making only $1,000 a year median income, you don't have the luxury of paying for things. You need to have passive refrigeration, passive cooling, make it where it's almost free energy. So part of this is how to make it affordable by dramatically lowering the cost of what it takes to operate a city individually and as the government. And then make agriculture and green spaces. So now you can have cooling, and the land can be used for food production. And so take a typical slum. And so what you see on the left is a satellite view, and you'll see like that 100-meter distance. So it's the same between the left and the right. And then on the right is 4-story circular buildings that have anywhere up to 2,600 residents, or here 2,200 residents. And you're looking at the same land, same density, but more personal space, lower cost, and it's a radically improved quality of life because one has no open space and the other has 100% open space. Talk about diametrically opposed. It's just, and so we're achieving these high densities with 100% open space, no tall towers. Everything is low rise, which means it's lower foundation costs, easier to construct. You don't need heavy cranes, and you can use the existing land. And so there's a lot of reasons why other folks programs have failed, and you can see some of them here. And we think we really have a model where this circular city costs less than a slum when you look at the infrastructure costs and the private investment and lower health care costs and higher productivity. So that's what we want to do is take that and put that incrementally to a circular city.
Now, one of the things the old economy, the economy we're in, does zoning on their buildings partially is because, of course, some of the activities could be environmental hazards, and don't want to mix, residential space with, I don't know, chemical factories and so on and so forth, or a shop, vehicle repairs space and all that. So how does
Yeah.
circular city
Yeah.
take
So
care of that?
great question, because the economy has changed a lot. All the services, a lawyer's office or energy production can now be on the rooftop, right? Where you have, rooftop over where kids play can be your energy production system. It's not a coal plant that's belching out, pollutants. So there's a lot of things that can be co-located together, and our zoning, though, has not evolved with that. Our zoning is like, okay, we're going to put things over here and things over there. Now, in the circular city, we do have areas for industry. So these would be sort of like the big, not box retail, but more large scale manufacturing that you need to have land. But even then, it's only using a 1%. The building itself is only using 1%. The 99% is agriculture and energy production. Because think of it this way: industry needs energy. Okay, so energy, the lowest cost of energy right now is solar. Okay, so imagine you have a very small building surrounded by a bunch of solar fields, okay, both thermal and photovoltaic, but you just don't want to use that land for just one use, not for power production. But it's great because now underneath it, grow crops, have livestock, have chickens co-located with your power production, right? So now you're creating energy for industry, have a lot of land area that you can use for agriculture, and now and then put it next to your city. So now you have a lot of open space that buffers your heavy industry, and make it where you have podways and you don't need to have these large roads going to those commercial areas. So, and you don't have these nasty coal plants or others. You're basically creating clean energy. So I think the zoning really needs to rethink about, based on the actual, sound and pollution and other things, because I don't think it makes sense right now. I think, like, for example, we need to have circular zoning, because how many places would you could take a 2-acre property and put 1,000 people on that piece of property with less land use, or less what do you call it, just impact on the land, than if there was a single family residence, right? Zoning isn't even designed for that. So we need to work with the zoning department and say, like, look, let's do this as a circular zoning, and that means something. So maybe we need new zoning ways of thinking about zoning.
Absolutely, makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe you can, for the benefit of our viewers, you could probably mention a little bit on how TransitX is working with
Yeah,
MVP.
well, you guys have, just innovative ways of looking at commercial real estate and just out of the box, right? So, and what we're doing requires that. So I think it's a sort of a great match, because, it's not the same old anymore. All these things are changing, and you need minds that can kind of wrap their head around it and kind of see the different implications. I'll give you an example. Most real estate developers today, I don't think, understand the role of transportation in their properties. I'll give you an example, because when in LA, private developers built out the streetcar system that made so they could sell their suburban developments, because they could create a connection to the city, right? They couldn't sell those properties unless they had the streetcar system. But then once the streetcar system was in operation and they sold their properties, then they didn't have a revenue model to keep it up, and then it moved to cars and stuff. But there is a very tight relationship, because it's not about location. It's about access. And if you have better ways of creating access, your location is less important. And I think you guys understand that. And I wonder how many other real estate professionals really understand that relationship between access mobility, transportation, and land use issues, and commercial and residential. That I don't see there's that many, because they just like for example, TransitX itself is commercial. A podway is a commercial income property, right? It is real estate because it uses aerial right of way. You have
Yes.
offtake agreements and you have revenue that's coming in. Now it's not like traditional square footage and getting $1 per square foot, but it is real estate. Just it's not like real estate how normal, well, not normal people, but traditional people would think about that. It's just so we need to partner with people that understand those differences, and that's what you guys bring to the table.
You know, yesterday Mike Miller had a presentation on how to purchase real estate, commercial real estate with zero down payment. And we had a whole lot of people at that webinar. And it's amazing on how people were shocked about a bunch of huge real estate buildings and in the country, multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of have been purchased zero down over the years. And so what you're saying there is really interesting, because a lot of people play within the space of commercial real estate, but they really don't know too much on what is going on in there. Yeah. So Mila, maybe you can mention a little bit about.
Yes, we put on a webinar, 28 different and distinct strategies to acquire commercial real estate with 0% down. And of course, commercial real estate is quite different than residential because of all these unique and different options that you can't do in residential.
Yeah.
Was one of those carbon financing?
So,
was that yeah.
No, that was not included in this discussion in this webinar. It could be.
We actually have a total of 42, but we did not add the rest of them because we thought it was going to become too complicated real quick. Because the ones he presented by themselves, people asking so many questions that were almost irrelevant because they didn't understand what he was talking about.